Zidande and Electro Ninja here. Real quick before we actually get into this video, this is part 2 of the gender bent alternate universe theory. So if you guys want to see the first part, then that is up in the iCards. Just a reminder that this is based off of the last chapter of My Hero Academia Smash Volume 1. So, yeah. But anyways, let's get in to Class 1B. Now, first off, there's a few problems with this whole class. As many of these students, we haven't really gotten the chance to truly get to dissect all of their quirks like we've been able to for the class of 1A. And the same goes for what we're going to be talking about in part 3 tomorrow. But we can at least start talking about some of them. Especially thanks to volumes 21 through 23, which are the arc about Class 1A and Class 1B fighting against each other. And we actually get a full page that is devoted to just showing off all of the different students. So, luckily, since I've read this, I'm actually able to give a pretty good explanation of all of the students and their quirks. So, first off is Yosetsu Owase, who has the quirk to basically fuse anything that is non-living together into on the molecular level. Oh boy, he is probably the most frightening of all of these characters if his quirk is reversed. If Awase becomes a girl and gains the opposite of his current quirk, then basically what would happen is that he would be able to either unbind anything molecularly, so basically anything that is fused together, such as he could take apart buildings or whatever, but another possibility is that he could actually cause the atoms of the different items to basically to be broken apart, which would cause atomic bombs. He could literally make atomic bombs just by touching things, and that is terrifying. Or rather, she would. So I don't know if they're actually going to go that way with this whole idea, but it's definitely something to at least be thinking about. Next up is Sen Kaibara. His quirk is actually kind of interesting in the normal version. He's basically able to spin any part of his body to basically make it into a drill. We don't actually get to see very much of this quirk, and honestly, I don't really know what would be the opposite of it. As, like I said, he can spin any part of his body, and it really just doesn't make sense to really reverse it in any way, shape, or form. So honestly, I'm just gonna have to say we'll have to skip him because he's just too complicated to make into a girl. And the same also goes for Togaru Kamakiri, who he's the bug boy. His ability is that he can shoot blades out of his arms. There's really no opposite of that. I mean, maybe he can make his arms into guns or whatever, but that's literally the only thing that I can think of off the top of my head. Like I said, those two are really challenging to really say what their quirk could be. So, yeah. Next is Shihai Kurorio. This is the Plain and simple, he's the black guy. He's the only character that is pitch black, and he can go into anything that is black and basically move around in it, take control of it, all that jazz, and it's actually a really interesting factor. Um, really, the only thing that I can think of what his quirk would be the op with if he got gender swapped would be that he would, instead of going into anything that is black, he would be able to go into anything that is white. Honestly, making him one of the more dangerous of the characters. But I'm honestly still uncertain exactly how they would go with his, if they were to gender bend him the way that, like I said, happens in Smash. Next up is Kendo. Kendo is actually the most straightforward one so far. As we all know, her quirk allows her to grow her fist to this just an enormous size. I think in the other way, if in her gender bend, she would actually become, her fists would become extremely small. This would actually make him probably a really well suited for the support course. If you guys don't know, in electronics and other engineering, aside from big building things, one of the biggest things that people want, especially, and the same goes for making clothes and stuff, is smaller hands. The smaller your hand is, the more you can actually do in smaller areas. Even I have pretty big hands, making it pretty hard for me to do certain things when I'm working with electronics. So, and I had like the smallest hands in my electronics class. So, when we needed to do something really small, I was actually usually the one who was brought in to do that stuff. That would actually, if Kendo got her quirk swapped, she would actually be one of the best students for the support course. Obviously, she wouldn't be great into the hero course, but support course, honestly, would be a fantastic fit. Next is Yu Kodai. Her quirk currently allows her to alter the size of whatever she touches, but it does not work on living things. This one's weird. This one is actually probably the weirdest one. I think for her, she probably, figuring out what would be the opposite again is really hard, and this is one of the biggest reasons why Class B is really challenging to do for this whole segment. I was kind of thinking of waiting for a little bit, but then I decided against it. There's just simply nothing that would be better. I mean, usually she uses the power to make things bigger, but honestly, if she wants to, if we want to, we could just say that she makes things smaller, or maybe she can alter her own size, allowing her to shrink down or become large. Kind of like what I theorized one of the previous holders of One for All used to have. But honestly, I'm unsure. Next is Kinko Komori. She has the power to basically plant mushrooms. The thing is that her quirk is probably the weirdest of all of them. As, like I said, she plants mushrooms. That's basically all her quirk is. She has 2 little spray bottles that she fills with water, and then she plants mushrooms. I think probably the most likely opposite that she would get if she got the gender bend if she was in the gender bent universe, was that she would be able to plant flowers instead, and it would basically be the exact same power, but um, just obviously slightly different. It's kind of hard to say for sure what it would be. Next is Ibara Shiozaki. Oh, her quirk doesn't really have a good opposite. Um, Honestly, all I could see for her is that, I don't know, maybe she has um, short hair that is not spiky. I don't know. There's like, it's hard to say for her. As she can grow her hair very long, break it off, and it's spiky, she's basically a Granocore from my books, and it's really hard to say what the opposite of that would be. There's just no easy way to put it. Like I said, a lot of Class B has issues. Next up is Jirota Shishida. His quirk allows him to grow in size and basically become this giant beast. Honestly, I would not put it past them if they did the alternate universe with the gender swap thing. Is for him, all they would do is they would allow him to basically change into this tiny little mouse that could run around and scamper around. Honestly, I still think he would have made it into Class B in that case, but that's mostly because of the way that other students would have gotten into the class. Rather than breaking all the robots, he would sneak around and destroy them that way, or turn them off, or whatever. But yeah. Next up, Niren Geki Shoda. Okay. For those of you who don't know what his quirk is, this is actually one of the really interesting things. After striking an object, he can activate a second strike remotely. That second hit will have a ton more oomph to it. My theory on what she would have as when in the female version is that basically what she would do is that she could punch something, and then what it would do is it would repair that object. Kind of like how, if you've seen the Cyanide and Happiness thing about Mr. Clean or whatever, I don't remember what his name was, but Clean Fist, whatever his name was. Basically, when he punches something, it would clean it up. In this case, what he does is what Shoto would do is she would punch something, and then afterwards it would repair back to being 10 times to being maybe twice as good as it was before she punched it. Like I said, that's mostly because of the fact that the second hit will have more oomph to it. Next is Pony Tsunatori. Actually, back to Shota. Shota would probably not be getting into the hero course, but would instead get into a support course. Like I said, preparing, great important thing to have, but it doesn't really work well for being a hero course student. But anyways, back to Pony Tsunatori. Her horn blasting, there's no good way to put what her quirk would be, and figuring out what it possibly will be is just an extreme challenge in almost all aspects. Like I said before, if in the earlier video about Class 1A, if Ojiro got his quirk reversed, he would probably get horns. What I'm imagining in this case is that Pony would probably get a tail. Most likely the way that the quirk would reverse is that if Ojiro and Tsunatori both got hit with it, they would literally look like each other, except that Pony Sunatori is uh, not Japanese. She is, but she's not as much. Um, but literally, yeah, the two would basically be like, wait, who's who now? Um, Maybe she could launch off her tail, but I don't know. It's honestly a pretty challenging thing to say. Um, uh, Kosei Subara. Wait a minute, which one was that? We'll come back to you. But anyways, back to Tetsu. Um, Tetsu. So he would basically just be the exact same as our favorite little boy from class 1A and basically become super smooth skin instead of super hard skin. However, I still think that he would still look like she would still look like she has steel for skin instead of the other. Yeah. But back to Kosei Subara, now that I actually remember what his quirk was. He is basically able to breathe and make solid air, which is honestly a really interesting quirk. That makes me think that what his quirk could be the opposite form is that he could probably breathe on something that is solid and it would then change into a gaseous state. Um, which sounds freaking dangerous as all heck, but it would also make things actually really interesting, especially for him getting into 1A. Honestly, I would not put it past him that in this form he would actually be able to get past the rest and get into class 1A. Next is Setsuna Tokage. Oh my gosh, her quirk is probably the most just freaky of all of these quirks. Her quirk allows her to basically, she can separate her body so that she basically is a lizard. She can break her body into multiple pieces, then she'll regenerate that over time, or she can return the pieces back to her body. And it's, like I said, it's really creepy, and what I'm kind of picturing for this is that possibly she would become frog-like, like how Suyu is, but it's less of a but to a lesser extent, just based off the fact that the way that they decided to go with Froppy in the Smash is that she became snake-like. That's why I'm thinking that Togake will basically become frog-like in this version. But it's still kind of a hard thing to say for sure. Manga Fukadashi. Yes, his name is Manga, and he has onomatopoeia powers. I love this character. Don't get me wrong. I want to see more of this character. But if he were to get the whole gender bend thing, I honestly have no idea what they would even do for him or her, because the whole onomatopoeia thing, it's really hard to reverse that. So possibly instead he would be able to, or rather she would be able to possibly create smaller characters. It's hard to say, and I'm not really sure exactly what they would do for that. So yeah. Next up, Juzo Honuki, however you want to pronounce his name, Mudman. Basically, his quirk in normal form allows him to make any solid turn into a liquid so that he can then move about in it, and then he'll return it back to solid. What I believe his quirk would be in the Gender Bend universe is that instead of making things liquid, instead he would make things solid, such as water he could then change into a solid so that he could walk across it. Really a helpful hero, but less helpful than other quirks. But considering the fact that he was one of the students that got in with recommendation, I'm actually willing to say that most likely Mudman would have still gotten uh, into either class A or B, thanks to the fact that he got his recommendation. The only reason that he would probably get into A is because of the fact that um what's her name? Momo would not have gotten into UA probably at all, but that's a story for another day. Next up is Kojiro Bondo. His quirk basically allows him to shoot out glue from his holes on his face. The reverse of that, let's just say he sprays acid instead. Clearly, I'm honestly just thinking that he would basically become another version of Pinky or Ashido, whatever you want to call her. But instead of shooting it out of her hands or her feet like Ashido does, she would shoot it out of her eye things equivalents. I have no idea what they call those things. Next up, Monoma. Just straight up, Monoma would be all for one, or the original One for All. just straight up, that's his quirk. Basically, what I think would happen is that he could basically touch someone, pass on his quirk, then they could then touch somebody else, and it would pass on both of their quirks, and that's basically how it would work. Except that for him it's limited, so yeah. Clearly, if he was to actually be like this, then he would not be getting into 1A. He probably wouldn't be actually doing much. He'd honestly be one of the weakest heroes in the entire school. So it's honestly uncertain what would happen with Monoma. Next is Reiko Yanagi, who has a poltergeist quirk. Her quirk is kind of a weird situation. Like I said, her quirk is poltergeist, allowing her to basically control objects, and that's it. We haven't gotten too much information on the full details of the quirk, as really all that we've gotten is a brief informational thing from volume 22. So whatever is going to happen in the future with that quirk is still kind of up for grabs. And because of that, I don't feel comfortable with actually saying what her quirk will be. Like I said, Class B is one of the hardest groups of students that for their quirks. And again, the same goes for Hiryurin. His quirk allows him to to grow scales on his body and then shoot them off. There's really no good opposite of that. So unfortunately, that's the whole of Class B. Like I said, Class B is a lot harder to unpack than and reverse from Class A. Almost everyone has a pretty reversible quirk in A, and those that don't, or at least you can theorize about what they could be. But for Class B, a good amount of them, about approximately half of the students, are just simply too straightforward and really hard to say what their quirks could be in the opposite form. So unfortunately, I have to say that this is the end of Class B. We'll see more of them in the future with most likely One's Justice 3, but for now, this is all that we have information-wise. But anyways, guys, let me know what you guys think of this theory down in the comments below. Of course, I'm curious to know what you guys think will actually happen in this alternate universe with all these different quirks and stuff. So let me know your thoughts and opinions. If you have anyone specific that you want me to talk about, maybe send those in now, because like I said, I will be talking about a few very specific ones in tomorrow's video as I'm mostly just going to choose some random characters that didn't really get too much information before, so expect that in tomorrow's video on part 3. But anyways, guys, of course, leave your theories and thoughts down in the comments below. If you are going to leave a theory, make sure you use the hashtag theory review. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video, subscribe if you're new, and ring that notification bell. And if you want to support the channel even more, then definitely head down to the description and check out all of the links down there. But anyways, guys, I've been Electro Ninja, and I'll see you guys next time. But on